Both of them, although they're separate, they've done some really interesting webinars. Cirium put one out last week, and both of them have some fleet forecasts and so forth. I think the one thing Courtney talked about, fuel. I think if you looked at non-fuel costs, right, they are increasing, and inflationary pressures are definitely there. I think some of that will reduce and come under control. Airline financial performance has been strong. Has it more or less plateaued or stabilized? It's still early in the cycle to say, and it's definitely better than where we were at in 2019 pre-COVID, but it's probably not as strong as it was then 2023. I think more broadly, though, it's a little bit like what Courtney said about Boeing, which is just like no news. It feels, absent something geopolitical or an external shock or something, that in a lot of ways it might be much of the same. The macro themes are there and constant. And so if you look out at the horizon, I don't know that changes all that much over the years. Now, that being said, in the same breath, this is the airline industry. It is, extremely volatile, and definitely, it will change if there's an economic shock, if geopolitical issues come into play, if, things on the cargo side with tariffs come into play. All of that could have a very near-term impact.
Yeah, great points, and I can definitely chime in on Courtney's point where being in the sustainable fuel industry, it's all about the premium above the jet fuel, right? That you and now suddenly the cost of jet fuel itself is lower, and so the premiums are higher, right? So these barriers just keep getting slightly more difficult to kind of overcome. But anyway, I think I kind of agree that the next few years in general would be slower from a sustainability perspective, and then we'll start to see some real good traction. We'll still make progress though, I think, right, in general. And I think my big prediction for 2025 is the likes of Archer Aerospace and Joby making some really big moves, right? Bigger deals signed, more testing done, and we might actually see some really big splashes by them. I feel, and that market is very untapped, and they have some really good products, right? So I think that's my prediction for 2025, which is slightly unconventional, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think if I think back, Ashwin, to Rob Morris's webinar and at Cirium, he made the point of it like the industry isn't necessarily short of aircraft; it's short of new aircraft, right? And aircraft that have been in storage that are returning to service helps mitigate that. If OEMs can ramp up production, that can mitigate that. I mean, a little bit on your theme of some of the EV tolls, being able to sign up customers and kind of grow that way. I wonder also, will we see an order by Embraer for the E2 as that airplane goes into more of mainline service? I think in the U.S. market, it's often associated with the E1 operating regional aircraft or regional service on behalf of legacy carriers, but the reality is the E2 is really not a regional aircraft. It's more of a narrow body airplane the size of an A319 and the 737-700. So will you see airlines that want that near-term narrow body capacity step up in order of that? Because that's, if you look at OEM backlogs, you're definitely going to get earlier availability from Embraer relative to Boeing or Airbus at this stage.
And you're already hearing, well, we have been hearing for a while about signs that particularly on the narrow body side, that the aircraft shortage is resolving. I don't want to say ending, but resolving. And I mean, originally, one of the things we were looking at last summer, you started to see things like deferrals, JetBlue, Spirit, right? These, granted, in a unique U.S. market, but it's the aircraft retirement. So this is the big trend that has been happening that now has suddenly caught up. Actually, it's just something that I published last week. But listen, Cirium's talking about it. IBA's talking about it. George Ferguson from Bloomberg just put out a good piece on the idea of, look, this is what happens. Airlines, and this is the way I explain it from the narrow body shortage perspective, and Rob Morris is absolutely right. We're short new airplanes. We're not short. We're still a little under on overall airplanes, but we have the GTF fleet coming back. We have production that will continue to ramp up, but most importantly and massively is any airline that found itself without production deliveries over the last 2.5 years have extended leases or stopped retiring aircraft.